Welcome to today's interview on Brighteon.com. I'm Mike Adams, the founder of Brighteon, and today a fan favorite guest returns just in time for the Arctic blast that's about to strike the United States. Well, it has already begun. It's Dane Wigington from geoengineeringwatch.org. Welcome, Dane. It's great to have you back on.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for your voice on so many fronts, and especially the climate engineering operations above our heads, which there is no place to hide from.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with every more extreme event, people are waking up to the fact that these are being manipulated, that the technology exists. It's in the U.S. Patent Office. You've documented it. That, weather modification, it used to be considered a fringe conspiracy theory. Now it's just everyday news about what's happening in Dubai, for example. So what do you think is happening with this big Arctic blast situation that's unfolding right now for North America?
Well, it's interesting they put labels on these engineered storms like that. The Arctic blast straight out of the record warm Gulf of Mexico. And they push this moisture, they manipulate it up the eastern seaboard, wrap it around a counterclockwise spinning low pressure zone, chemically nucleating it the entire way. And as you get further along in this process, you have the ice storm transition zone between the warm flow of Gulf of Mexico moisture and eventually what ends up being various forms of frozen material falling from the sky, chemically nucleated. And this frozen material, Mike, is falling at ever higher temperatures above freezing. It starts falling at far above freezing temperatures. Have you noticed that?
No. How is that possible?
Well, that's a good question. The Weather Channel is going to, climate engineering cover-up actors like those at the Weather Channel are going to great length to trying to explain this away. But now they're routinely showing snow starting at 38, 39 degrees, sometimes 40 degrees or above. We typically see this here in our part of California when they're nucleating over us, and they are right now as well. So as this process continues, if they continue the chemical ice nucleating cloud seeding operations, the surface temperatures do drop, sometimes precipitously, depending on how much of this they apply and how long they apply it for. But if any of your listeners are watching Weather Channel or other climate engineering cover-up agencies, they're seeing this now routine listing of snow beginning to fall at far above freezing temperatures. So again, they should question this. The laws of physics have not changed, but we know from chemical ice nucleating patents that they can nucleate ice at temperatures of 10, 12, 14 degrees above freezing. And this is a very elaborate science, if you will, chemical ice nucleation. And people think it's always a given. It happens at 32 degrees. I'd encourage them to think of their first aid kit, Mike, with a chemical cold pack in it. I know you know what those are, and it can sit on a shelf at room temperature for decades. When you mix those chemicals together, you have ice instantaneously. They're doing this on an unimaginably massive scale into cloud moisture right now.
Okay, so they can induce then all the hazards on the ground that come with extra ice and extra snow. But what about this cold blast? Now, we're told that this Arctic air that's entering North America at minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit is blasting down from the Northwest all the way across the Midwest and the North Midwest. And it's even going to reach Texas and Louisiana, apparently, in a few days. And we're told that these temperatures will be, in some areas, a relative minus 58 degrees compared to the normal average for this time of year. And that's in, I think, Wyoming, and in Oregon, it's going to be like minus 30 or 35 compared to normal. Those are relative temperatures. But they tell us there's some kind of like high pressure warm spot over the North Pole or something that's causing this. I don't know. It never seems to make any sense. What do you think is happening?
This is a complex scenario. As far as the cold air goes, they're robbing Peter to pay Paul, so to speak. Yes, they're pushing cold air south, but cold air, a surface layer that they have helped to create by placing an ionosphere heater-induced high-pressure dome over the west and forcing much of the Pacific moisture clockwise up and around that dome. Then it ends up in Alaska and circulating again clockwise around that. They're chemically nucleating it the whole way. They have created a pool of surface cold air in parts of BC and parts of central Canada. They're pushing that south, combining that with a warm flow of moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, again, and that's circulating around a counterclockwise rotating low pressure zone where they're chemically nucleating it. And again, it's extremely obvious. If your listeners are watching Weather Channel, for example, they go to great length with many CGI diagrams to try to explain away why it's snowing on the surface at 40 degrees. And it's becoming ever more ridiculous as they try to cover the tracks of the climate engineers.
So, Dane, I'm sorry to interrupt. This is windy.com right now today. I just want to bring this up so you could comment on it. It's kind of what you're talking about, this warm.
Now, in this particular case, on this particular scenario, okay, what you're seeing there, and that's a great diagram to show, you don't have any organized moisture coming into the west. What you have is a very heavily nucleated drifting mass of moisture. You have it scattering. The frequency transmissions scatter that moisture over the widest possible area. That's part of solar radiation management, part of geoengineering. So what we end up with here in Northern California, Mike, is constant days of freezing, drizzle, drippy, no organized rain, no wind of anything to speak of here. And with the wind, it's either on or off. And in the heavily nucleated areas where they're sensationalizing these snowstorms, they definitely have the wind turned on. And they can do that by manipulating atmospheric pressure zones. So now what you see with these theorized storms, Winter Storm Ember that just happened, Winter Storm Finn that's happening now, there is increasingly higher velocity surface straight line winds, which helps to augment the effectiveness of the endothermic reacting elements that are being seeded into the cloud moisture. So to simplify that, fire hosing moisture into the west and nucleating that to create a cool air pool on the surface. Same thing in Canada. Combining those two with the flow of warm moisture from the record warm Gulf of Mexico, chemically nucleating that. And they're trying to create as many sensationalized headlines as they can. And this is important to understand, that as they're doing this to skew people's understanding of the true state of the climate, every single engineered cool down they create, Mike, comes at the cost of an even further damaged climate overall.
Wow. So it seems like this is a sort of weather terrorism. I mean, this is designed to achieve maximum destruction. Is crop destruction part of this goal? Certainly.
And you mentioned earlier, Mike, at the hazards that this creates. So you see how many traffic accidents there are now, and certainly we would expect a snowy road to be slick. When you have surfactants in this mix, and we do, our lab testing has proven this again and again. Surfactants, for those that don't know what that is, it's what makes soap. It changes the molecular tension of water molecules. So you end up with what is, in essence, soap-soaked snow. So people who think they knew how to drive on snow now don't. It's a very different composition. And that composition can change from region to region depending on what they're seeding, depending on what the atmospheric conditions are. But it is very unlike naturally nucleated snow. And we now see a tremendous amount of pileups. 100-car pileups are now routine because of this surfactant-soaked snow.
Okay, now, Dane, I want you to comment on this. Show my screen, guys, because I went to this website, ventusky.com, and I fast-forwarded it to the projection for this coming Sunday evening. Now, look at this, Dane. Look at this.
Okay, can you leave that on the screen?
Yeah, let's leave it on the screen. Go ahead.
Okay, if you see on the upper left,
yep,
you see a clockwise rotation of that moisture coming back into
here?
BC. You have some coastal deflection, but you see it rotating clockwise.
Yep.
And then you see the moisture coming back down into central Canada, by the U.S. border, that cool air pool. This is what is scheduled, to keep in mind. So this is the scheduled weather, and you have some of the weather disseminating agencies, including Ventusky, may or may not have the latest updated script. That one looks updated because if you look at the NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration long lead forecast, what they did show about 5 days ago was that massive cool zone to be over the western U.S. as well. They've changed that, and now they're centering it more over the middle of the country with an extreme departure from normal. What they show is the maximum of 7-level departure from normal surface temperatures in the central U.S. If they can achieve that, that would be about 35 degrees below average.
Yeah, again, I mean, this is crazy. We're talking about -5 Fahrenheit in Oklahoma City.
Again, this is if they can achieve this, and chemical ice nucleating operations certainly can achieve this. This is a shallow surface layer of cold. I want to stress that. This is not indicative of the overall atmospheric conditions.
Okay.
And for those, and Mike, I know you know this, how much the establishment, the matrix media, and all the so-called experts, climate so-called scientists, try to marginalize anybody who would suggest that they are engineering these winter weather events, when we've had mainstream media coverage of the Chinese scientists doing exactly this for decades, and coverage from Fox News, The Guardian, MSNBC, Reuters, BBC. I could go on and on. But yet, if you bring it up here in the U.S., suddenly it's some sort of fringe topic because they don't want people to realize the severity of what's being done to them.
Dane, let me ask you to comment on this too. This is so, go back to the map, guys. This Arctic blast that's projected here, it goes all the way to Houston, where the Gulf wind coming up here is only meeting that Arctic blast almost at the Gulf coastline of Texas. I mean, that's almost unheard of. How are they achieving? Yeah, go ahead.
If you saw the rotation there of the moisture flowing off the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah.
Rotating around that high pressure zone that's off the U.S. East Coast. It's a clockwise rotation, pushing some of that moisture back up into the U.S. And what's happening right now with Winter Storm Finn moving up the eastern seaboard, the flow of moisture is so warm that I just saw the update about 30 minutes ago that they're predicting temperatures in parts of the Northeast, nighttime temperatures of 60 degrees and rain. That flow of moisture is so warm. So ask yourself, how can it possibly have gone from snow, which we just had with Winter Storm Ember? Now all that snow's melting. Now we have flooding because they're pushing so much warm moisture. They're not able to nucleate it fast enough to cool things down. So you're having that kind of extreme weather whiplash scenario. And Mike, if I could, while you have the screen there, if I could point out or remind your followers, and I know you remember the deep freeze in Texas 2 years ago, correct?
Yes. Yeah, February of 2021.
And you correctly pointed out that it's warmer in the Arctic right now than some of the places in the lower 48. So what did we have in 2021? When the Texas deep freeze occurred, we had temperatures below zero in Texas, while it was 33 degrees warmer at the North Pole, same window of time. While parts of Florida at almost the same latitude were 85 degrees. Again, those type of extreme deviance departures that is not nature.
Okay, so let me ask you this, just on behalf of any skeptical viewers, especially the skeptical viewers that are concerned about so-called climate change. Surely somebody here is going to say, well, this is all the result of, people burning fossil fuels, and that's all it is. Like, there's no conspiracy of anybody messing with the weather. There's no geoengineering. It's just people burning gas, and that causes all of this. What would you say to that kind of response?
If I can back up a bit on that to 1998, and that's when the term climate change was implemented, because 1998 was the warmest year ever recorded up to that point in time, because none of the science data indicates you would expect to have extreme anomalous weather whiplash flash surface coolings with a warming world. None of the science said that until 1998, when they knew they were going to be utilizing this type of process, chemical ice nucleation, cloud seeding, for engineering winter weather events. So they needed a term that would program much of the population to believe that these flash cooldowns were somehow a part of global warming, which they are not. They are completely engineered, as you correctly stated. So we have a so-called environmental global warming community that refuses to acknowledge the single biggest piece in the equation, Mike. And until they do, anything they say is illegitimate. Bottom line is there is no rational denial that this is going on, absolutely none. And the disdain we feel at geoengineeringwatch.org for all of those communities that continue to deny it is immense.
So, okay, thank you for that answer, Dane. Getting back to the map, and show the map again, guys. Look at this area that's going to be hit so hard. This is the breadbasket of America. look, it's Kansas, Oklahoma, Nebraska, parts of Colorado. The food production in this area is massive. This is what feeds much of the United States. Of course, I mean, in California, we have, all of this. What's the name of the valley there in California where all the food production?
Central Valley, Sacramento Valley.
Yeah, Central Valley. So it's going to be okay. But in terms of the wheat, the corn, the barley, all these things that are grown here in the Midwest and also the upper Midwest, devastating temperatures here. Now, I understand this is not, peak growing season right now, but won't this affect crops? And there are winter wheat crops that are growing in some of these areas right now. What are the implications going to be, you think, Dane?
Devastation. You're completely correct, Mike. Absolutely correct. And even if we didn't have this, the soils are so radically compromised, they're nearly sterile right now. When you kill soil microbiome, and I know you know much about this, you turn what was soil into dirt, and that's in essence what we have now. So these types of flash freezes are being used to crush crops all over the globe.
And we also have a lot of, let's say, orchards. I'm not talking about citrus in this area, but nut orchards, for example, and certain types of fruit orchards, especially, think about this, like Eastern Oregon and Eastern Washington and so on. You have a lot of fruit orchards in these areas, and those orchards can only sustain, certain temperature variation. A lot of these trees are going to be severely damaged.
And here's what needs to be considered with that too. You're correct, completely correct. It is damaging them. But here in Northern California, where I live in the wilderness of Northern California, where we historically have gotten our first frosts and freezes in October. The first one we had was last Saturday night. That is the first freeze we have had this season. And of course, now that they've flipped that switch, they're chemically nucleating, they're trying to create some sensationalized headlines. Now we're showing completely unnatural cold that it's not getting much above the high 30s now, even during the day. Just the temperature gauge sits at the same spot. So it's this pendulum that they swing back and forth as they're completely derailing the climate system. And as far as the trees needing a certain amount of freezing time, they need dormant time, but not to this degree, as you correctly stated. And this off again, on again, warm, cold, and back, this is not helping agriculture. In fact, it's completely tanking here, Mike. And we see with the deciduous trees, and we've noted this for 10 years, and we've recently completed testing on this, and we're going to post more detailed data on that soon. But we know they are spraying defoliants now. We have proven that conclusively with testing. And why would they do that? Farmers have been using that in the Central Valley for many, many years to force the trees into dormancy, because without that dormant time, they will not produce, and it's not getting cold enough to create the natural dormancy cycle of the abscission hormone. So the bottom line is there is so much coming down on us for toxic elements, aluminum, barium, strontium, manganese, polymer fibers. And Mike, you've probably seen that new articles, I think today and yesterday, at how many microplastic particles are in a bottle of water, so-called clear drinking water. It's in everything, but those microplastics are part of climate engineering operations as well. So And again, the surfactants, the graphene, all of this now in our water supplies, our food, and these chemically nucleated storms, aka engineering winter that we see right now, such aggressive engineering. We don't know the totality of toxic elements being used in that. And Mike, you saw the COP28 conference that just occurred in December, right? The climate conference?
Yes, exactly.
Total sham.
Private jets and the whole deal. Yeah.
It's smoke and mirrors. And what they're doing at those conferences, and we may be seeing the result of that right now, is they are establishing their strategy for climate engineering, forcing countries around the globe to actively or passively participate in climate engineering. And again, the aggressiveness which we have seen them double and triple down in climate engineering since the first of the year is a likely indication that at that conference, they made the decision to further ramp up their already incredibly destructive efforts. And we're likely seeing the commencement of those plans right now with Winter Storm Ember and Winter Storm Finn, and there's likely more to come.
So, Dane, I have a big question for you, but let me remind the audience about your website, geoengineeringwatch.org. Folks, you need to go to this site. You need to sign up. consider donating if you want to support Dane's work, because his work is, look, I'm just going to say it, Dane. I think that your voice and your work is one of the most important vectors for the survival of the human race. And that's not an exaggeration. There are many vectors where they're trying to really kill us off. Geoengineering is one of the most dangerous because it affects every single person in every way possible. But I want to mention also another one is, of course, the destruction of our farms through regulations and government policies. You know, the farmers in Germany are erupting right now, mass protests across Germany, because the government is taking away the diesel fuel subsidies that made German farmers, you know, competitive with other European nations. And the war on diesel and the war on farms, the war on farm animals, you know, cows. I mean, in the Netherlands and in Ireland and a lot of this across Europe and also increasingly in other countries, this combined with geoengineering, is my point, is going to lead to global famine. How can it not? It seems like it's 100% designed to starve billions of people. What would you say?
There's no question. Absolutely no question about that. And they're not going to stop. They're completely committed to the ongoing destruction. And what's important to consider, remember, as you correctly brought up about prioritizing the threats we face, if you will, and we know the threats we are facing from the medical industrial complex. What I would point out to your listeners is that with the atmospheric aerosol dispersion platforms already in place and already being utilized, they can, at any moment of their choosing, disperse something much more lethal into that mix. You and I have discussed this before, but we know we have polymer fibers and graphene are part of the elements that are showing up in our precipitation samples. Both of those elements used militarily for biological warfare as biological carrier platforms. So we have no way of knowing at any given moment what they're dispersing into our skies, what it's doing to us, what the cumulative effect is, but they can level the playing field overnight. Should they choose to put something much more lethal in this mix, we're all done overnight if they feel they're losing control. That's why stopping, exposing, and halting what's happening in our skies, not just killing soils, waters, fish, crops, us, but they can at any moment completely alter this equation, Mike. That needs to be remembered and considered.
Well, you know, and Bill Gates is rolling out aerosolized vaccines. No needles required. They could, I mean, they're spraying all kinds of things in the air right now. They spray malathion over cities when they claim there's a mosquito outbreak. So why couldn't they just start spraying so-called vaccines, which are just bioweapons? I mean, they're basically just bio-bombing the human race with biological weapons sprayed from airplanes. I mean, mass crimes against humanity, attempted extermination. That's what we're talking about.
It's completely correct. And again, when the fact that they could label them as a aerially dispersed, quote, vaccine, it's not a vaccine, as you correctly stated. It's a bioweapon. That's what it is. And we don't know what type of latency period there might be with what's already been seeded on us. If prions are in this mix that we're inhaling with every breath we take, going in through our olfactory nerve and our nasal passages, going into our bloodstream, if there are prions in this mix, they can have a latency period of years to decades. We have no way of knowing what's a part of the mix that's already been dispersed over us. Bottom line, it has to stop. And the aggressiveness with which they're engineering these winter weather events right now, Mike, is waking a lot of people up. I can say that definitively. Your voice has been hugely helpful in bringing this issue to light, and encourage people to effectively and efficiently start spot fires of awareness. That's so critical because people can feel completely helpless at the overwhelming tidal wave over our heads and this, proverbially with this climate engineering operations that you can't escape from. But if we can bring this issue to light and fully expose it, I would argue the fur will fly. That's the proverbial pitchforks and torches moment. But it is essential that we expose and stop this. It's the single biggest hole in the bottom of the boat at this moment. Greatest threat we face short of nuclear cataclysm.
And it seems like they can scale this up when the people start to, rise up or become aware. It's clear that the current governments of the world, many of which are illegitimate, they stole their way into power, they consider the people to be the greatest threat. They don't represent the people. They're at war with the people. And if the people start to wake up and realize, hey, our currency is a scam, the central banking is a total scam, or the collusion between government and big tech and censorship, it's a total scam. It's like they can just crank out more weapons, more freezes to occupy you and make you starve and make you desperate. It's like they have an unlimited number of weapons and they're just cranking them out whenever they feel like it.
And they can blame it on nature.
And they blame it on nature. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And what you just stated is profoundly important, that people don't understand, and they need to understand. As you so accurately outlined, once that critical moment of wake up occurs, the entire game changes at that moment. The current paradigm is overturned at that moment. And those in power know that once that delusion is shattered and people realize that we're not just at a bump in the road, we're at the end of the road of what was, that's the moment that we need to be most worried about, because that's when those in power will play those much bigger cards, which they absolutely hold. And that moment could happen today, tomorrow. We have so many factors that are so far past the breaking point right now. And to weave another factor into this, Mike, if we take one aspect of what climate engineering is most responsible for damaging, the Earth's ozone layer, which if you compressed it into a single molecular level is, I believe, about 6 millimeters thick. It's unimaginably a thin layer if it was, again, compressed to a single molecular level that allows us to live on this planet. And climate engineering is wiping it out. Our latest update from the NASA contract engineer that works directly for geoengineeringwatch.org, former NASA contract engineer, is that he estimates that on average globally, we're down to about 23% of the ozone layer remaining, again, on average, which means it's thicker in some places, obviously thinner or non-existent in the polar regions. And the narrative that the ozone layer is recovering is complete, utter nonsense. Again, no ozone layer, no terrestrial life on Earth, can't grow food, and that's already the case in many places. We have reports from all over the world of people's gardens being singed and fried from the UV. We have the Cambrian layer on trees being burnt off from tip to trunk. And when people feel how hot and radiant that sun feels when you're in a clear spot of it, and the ozone layer thickness waxes and wanes, so it's not uniform all the time. But the sun is incredibly intense. You can feel it on surfaces. And Mike, you've probably noticed that, right?
Well, right. And also, let's talk about the magnetosphere for a second, because it's not just ozone, the magnetosphere. Right. I interviewed another guest on this the other day, talking about, of course, the weakening of the magnetic field that protects Earth from many of the most dangerous ionizing radiation rays from the sun. So, not only is the ozone deteriorating, but then the magnetosphere is deteriorating, which means you're going to have straight up chromosomal double-strand breaks, crop damage, like genetic mutations of crops, as well as humans and animals. It's like they've opened up the gates of hell against the surface of the Earth. No other way to put it.
And even when we look at the problems with the magnetosphere, it's important to remember that, again, the human species is at fault. The Project Starfish Prime, the detonation of hydrogen bombs in the magnetosphere, did irreparable damage that we're still dealing with today. So it's really mathematically and statistically impossible to categorize anything as a sort of cyclical pattern when we know we have so much human-caused damage. We've obviously trashed the planet in many ways. I don't think anybody would rationally deny that. But when we intentionally intervene, when we detonate hydrogen bombs in the magnetosphere, when we engineer the entire planet, that's not just the dispersion of these toxic elements, but, Mike, as you know, the frequency transmissions that are incredibly destructive, that are used to manipulate these particles. And now on top of that, we have two programs that we believe are already operational, Project Lucy and Project Alamo. Those are acronyms for microwaving the atmosphere with opposing frequencies in a desperate, dangerous, and unimaginably destructive attempt to molecularly degrade some of the methane that's building up in the atmosphere. And on the methane front, too, it's important people get past the narrative that's intended to divide, that the methane is from cow flatulence. That is meaningless and used, again, to polarize and divide people. The true methane monster, the methane threat from thawing and releasing deposits in the Arctic tundra on the Arctic seafloor. This is the Bermuda Triangle scenario. Mike, if your listeners haven't seen a photograph of the Siberian methane craters, I think that would shock them to the marrow. It looks like a nuclear bomb crater has gone off, and that's methane that's exploding into the atmosphere. So again, climate engineering further contributing to that factor in the attempt to hide it or mask it. They are making the situation worse, not better. And from all these directions, Mike, climate engineering has helped to further trigger and fuel feedback loops, which hold our near-term existence in the balance.
So the bottom line is, anybody who wants to survive the next decade, let's say, is going to have to be incredibly resilient with food, with maybe mobility, off-grid activities, because, I mean, the power grid is not going to be reliable with these kinds of weather events. And we were even warned about rolling blackouts, even by, I think, NERC said that severe weather events, I mean, this was a few months ago, they said severe weather events this winter are going to cause rolling blackouts. And it's kind of like, because they know that's coming. And here we are. You know, we're right on the verge of this. How many people are going to lose power? How many elderly people are going to die freezing in their homes? Or people being unable to, get to a hospital with a heart attack or something because everything's closed down. The gas stations don't work. The cell towers don't work. It's like the weather attack, it causes so much destruction of the basic infrastructure, food, communications, transportation, energy, all these things that are necessary to keep human beings alive and to keep cities functioning. It's like the ultimate weapon.
And thank you, Mike, for your always willingness to cut to the core of the matter, to not pull punches. Thank you for that.
I don't pull punches, no.
Because on the current course, mathematically, statistically speaking, the fact that grids are going to shut down permanently, that's the least of our problems if we remain on this course. If the intentional intervention in the planet's life support systems are allowed to continue, mathematically, statistically speaking, none of us will be here in a decade. And I know that is impossible to imagine for most people, but I'm asking them to look at statistics, at math, not at preconceptions, programming, bias. Look at statistics. We've already lost 80 to 90% of Earth's insect populations now, today. The biggest causal factor for that, and again, I'm not understating the endless amount of damage the human race has done to the planet in countless ways. I'm not understating that. But what I'm saying is this intentional intervention with highly toxic elements, nanoparticle elements, which are saturating everything, which infiltrate all forms of life, and cause synergistic toxicity as well, because there's so many of these different toxic particles. When we consider that, the destruction of the ozone layer and its effect on every form of life from the clouds to the ground, we've lost 90% of the plankton populations in the Atlantic, other oceans not far behind, insect populations down 80 to 90% today, fisheries are crashing, 90% of global pelagic fish population, the food fish, gone, 98% of bluefin tuna gone. Wildlife populations down 70% in 40 years on the current statistical trajectory. 0 hour for no functional wildlife populations left by 2026 or shortly after. These are right now statistical trajectories, which indicates we won't be here far past that point. We can't live without functional habitat, period. As the web of life dies, we will die. So what I'm stating to people is, please don't shut down. Please understand you're here for a reason, that we all have a part to play in this most critical fight of everything that we hold dear. And that if we can stop this intentional intervention, the microwaving, the dispersion of these particles that are derailing weather systems all over the globe, if we can stop this and allow the planet to respond on its own to the damage done, we could at least buy time. We could ferret out those that are responsible for these programs, either actively or passively. We could change our trajectory, and we must change our trajectory or we have no chance.
Well, this is why your work is so important, Dane. And I want to remind viewers again, geoengineeringwatch.org is the website where you can find Dane's work. And also, Dane and I have done several interviews, and you can find those interviews on Brighteon.com. And we also post on Rumble. And Dane, I'd really like to do a more regular type of interview with you if you're open to that idea, because I think we're entering an acceleration of all of this. It's very clear. All the things that you just mentioned, that if we don't stop this, we're in real trouble. And yet the powers that be, the governments and the people and the globalists that have the power, they're accelerating this. And most people, members of the public, are not yet aware of this, although that is growing substantially thanks to the efforts of people like you and alternative media and so on. It's still not the majority of the population. So the question is, at what point do mainstream people panic or freak out and realize, oh my gosh, we're in real trouble here. Like, we may not survive this. Is that day coming?
Yes. And to back up on the exposure of this issue, I'm immensely grateful to you, to Natural News, that you have helped tremendously in this process of helping us to reach a critical mass of awareness, because no matter how much research we do at geoengineeringwatch.org, no matter how much testing we do, you have helped to give that a voice, to help expose it. And to back up to something else you just said that is also profoundly important, this is an exponential equation. It is non-linear. It is unimaginably non-linear. And that's what people need to understand, to realize, to accept. You can't look backward at a graph at how long it took us to get to this dark place and think we have an equal amount of time moving forward. We don't. This is an equation that is accelerating wildly, as you just stated. And climate engineering is further fueling that process to an unimaginable degree. And there is nothing, to make that clear, there is nothing benevolent about climate engineering operations. It is sold as some benevolent activity that we might do if things get bad enough. They're already way worse than bad enough because we've already been doing this for over 75 years. Again, people need to realize we're not just entering the sixth great mass extinction, we're neck deep in it. This is exponentially worse than any previous known mass extinction in Earth's long history, because this is happening literally hundreds of times faster than any previous mass extinction. So we are in absolutely uncharted territory. The exponential equation, hugely important, as you stated, and to reach that mass of awareness where those in media are forced to wake up, all of us are needed in that effort. And at geoengineeringwatch.org, we try to provide tools to help start the conversation on this issue. Shirts and hoodies and printed materials, the printed materials we pass on for less than our cost of producing and shipping. But we try to provide those materials to help start the conversation with credible data from a credible source so that we can start spot fires of awareness, merge those fires into a blaze that can't be extinguished, and we can force this issue to light once and for all and cause a shockwave around the globe, Mike.
Exactly. That's why it's critical for people to share this information. Let me ask you something else, Dane, along those lines. So, and this might sound tangential, but it's not. This is critical. We are building essentially a human knowledge time capsule, which is a large language model. It's like an AI LLM chatbot knowledge-based system that we're going to be giving away to people for free at the end of March. That's when version 1 comes out. And we're encapsulating knowledge from a lot of experts, like Dr. Judy Mikovits, for example. Her entire body of work, all her videos and articles and books are going to be used to train this system. So the system will reflect her knowledge, and her influence will be immortalized through this system that we're releasing, open source. It's from our nonprofit. I would love to invite you for the same thing. We can talk after the show, but I would love to immortalize all the videos that you've ever done, every article on Geoengineering Watch, put that into the system so that if we are offline and if systems start to collapse, people can use this tool offline and they can ask it questions like a chatbot, and they can get answers that come from the knowledge base of people like you and I and others who are censored. We have to protect human knowledge, and this is a project that we're doing. Would you like to have a conversation about that?
Absolutely. Absolutely, Mike. I'm again so grateful for all you've done to help on so many fronts to pull back the curtain, expose the insanity, and absolutely count on my full participation. Well,
all you got to do is give us permission and we go for it. And but I'll give you more details afterwards so that you know, like, it doesn't copy your articles or anything. It just, your articles would influence the model, and it would add knowledge to the model when people start asking it questions about weather weapons and geoengineering and climate and so on. So this is one way that we're trying to create tools that people can use to make it through all of this. I mean, I see the systemic collapse being engineered in so many different ways: famine, weather systems, financial collapse, cyber weapons, even false flags. And not everybody's going to make it. I mean, this is, I've been trying to get this point across to people, and it's hard for people to grasp it. Like, I think we're going to lose billions of human beings before we stop this thing. What do you think?
Thank you. Thank you so much for acknowledging that fact that so few are willing to acknowledge. Thank you for your courage in that. And here's my point as to why this is so important, that we can accept reality well or poorly, but accept it we must. We have no other choice. The sooner we accept it, the better chance we have of doing something about it. And if our collective efforts, and again, I'm so grateful for your voice in this battle, Mike, if our collective efforts can allow anyone to make it through what's coming and to learn from the horrific mistakes that our species have made with technology so far, then that effort will have been worth it, won't it? And no matter how ominous the horizon looks, no matter how long the odds appear to be against us, the example I've used in the past, and I'll use it again now because it exemplifies this point. For any one of us, if our child was in a burning house and we knew we had very little chance of saving that child, would we not run into that house and try? Of course we would. Of course we would. And also with those who have been trained to believe that they have no power, there's nothing they can do, so why try? That is absolutely not true. As I've said many times, and I will say again now, those in power are not gods, and we are not helpless. We absolutely can make a difference. We are the ones we've been waiting for. If we combine our efforts, if we focus on what is within our control, start those spot fires of awareness in your individual circles, ask those you wake up to do the same. If we all do that, we will force this issue to the full light of day. And if populations around the world knew what was happening in their skies, I would argue, again, we could overturn this equation. If our military brothers and sisters knew that they're being lied to, that what they're participating is their own demise, the demise of their posterity, along with the rest of us, we could stop these programs from the inside out. And that is the great imperative of our time.
Wow. Well said. Exactly. And I guess the silver lining here is the more they accelerate these weapons, the more people will have to notice. I mean, at some point, it's like, well, I mean, you just look at the sky, you look at what's happening with the weather, you look at the crop destruction, and like, wait a minute, this is not normal. It wasn't this way when we grew up. Something has changed. What is that? So thanks to people like you, Dane, people are going to be asking questions. Now, let me ask you how our users can help support you. Talk about the options. What do you have? I know you have a donate button at Geoengineering Watch, but are there films or other things that they could purchase? I know you have T-shirts and things. What do you have that people could get?
The most key thing is just to help us to sound the alarm. If they, for example, shared a link to our groundbreaking documentary, The Dimming, which they can find for free on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org, that is the most comprehensive tool on this subject, and they forward that link to elected officials, agricultural groups, farm groups, the list is endless. Forward that link with a very brief message to please investigate. It's always good to CC others, openly CC with that link so that those receiving the message know that there are a number of people involved in that communication that would also know that they now know. This is especially important with elected officials. When you CC a message to them and you include a list of 50 or 100 of their constituents, they now know that all those constituents know that they've been informed of this issue, so they can't deny it any longer. So to help us to start those spot fires of awareness, that is what we most need the help with. Share the Geoengineering Watch link to The Dimming off our homepage to help us bypass social media censorship. That's what we need help with most. And on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org, there's the activist suggestions link, which outlines more details on how you can use your own personal situation to help expand this circle of awareness, help to stoke that fire and ask others to do the same. So, and there's, again, our printed materials, we pass those on for less than our cost of producing and shipping. Our only goal, my only goal, to absolutely expose this issue, and the fur will fly. I live for that day, Mike. And if we could do that, it would drag so many other issues to the surface with it as people realize what's been done to them without their knowledge or their consent.
Let's do it. Everybody, spread the word. share the website geoengineeringwatch.org. Share this interview. You can repost this interview. In fact, you have our permission to do so. This is a red alert moment for humanity. You know, it's kind of it's a do or die thing. And I know there are so many concerns and so many threats that occupy people's consciousness, worried about the loss of the dollar, worried about inflation, which I understand. I mean, that's happening too. But if we don't have a functioning biosphere, nothing else matters. Your derivatives, your pensions, and it doesn't matter if you're dead. If we don't have a biosphere, that's it, right? I mean, it's so obvious at this point.
I don't know. I don't have the words to thank you for being so clear on that point. Thank you, because that is the bottom line. If we don't deal with this and the planet's life support systems fail, all other causes, all other concerns become moot. Thank you for acknowledging that so clearly, Mike.
Well, thank you for all the work that you're doing here, Dane. I appreciate you taking the time to join me today. It's always intriguing to speak with you, very educational. And somehow, even though you give us a lot of news that some people would say is kind of doom-ish, but speaking with you gives me hope that there are mechanisms to overcome this. So I want to thank you for always bringing that positive solutions approach to every interview that we do together, Dane.
I am deeply grateful for you, Natural News, and your profound help with sounding the alarm, Mike. Thank you.
Well, we're in this together, Dane. Team Humanity, and we intend to survive this. No matter how crazy it gets, we intend to make it through. And maybe, why don't we stop these evil globalist bastards who are trying to exterminate us all, and then humanity could live in peace and prosperity and joy and abundance, because we live on an incredible planet with incredible resources and sunlight and minerals and soil and food and microbiology and liquid water and all these things. I mean, you couldn't ask for a better planet. Let's not screw it up. How about that? Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Dane. Dane Wigington, geoengineeringwatch.org, one of the most important and courageous voices of our time. If humanity is to survive this, it's going to be due to the efforts of people like Dane. So give him every bit of support that you can. And thank you for supporting us here at Brighteon.com, naturalnews.com, and my online store, healthrangerstore.com. That helps fund all of these efforts so that we can help save humanity. Literally, this is not exaggeration. This is a do or die moment for the human race and the future of our world. So thank you for watching today. Everybody, take care. This segment is sponsored by BeReady123.com, which is associated with a satellite phone store. So when you need backup power, emergency power, they have solar generators. They have the EcoFlow devices that you can charge with solar energy. And if you go to their website, BeReady123.com, you can see the monthly deals they have. And these can help keep you functioning during power grid failures. You can charge them with grid power when the grid is up, and then they can, of course, last for many hours, depending on the size and depending on what you're running, even when the grid goes down. Solar panels can recharge them. There are other ways to charge them. And then they have massive size ones here that can run essentially most household items for quite an extended period of time. So this is just one set of tools to consider for your survival and preparedness for what's coming. I mean, it's incredibly obvious now that extreme weather events are going to become, well, more accelerated. Geoengineering is kicking in. They're trying to cause food crop failures, famine, and just death by power grid failures. And that will kill, unfortunately, a lot of people, especially those who are not prepared. So get prepared in every way you can. Have a backup food supply, have backup power, have backup communications, backup emergency medicine and first aid, backup self-defense, and everything else that you need in order to make it through these very difficult scenarios, many of which are being engineered on purpose to try to make your life difficult. But here at Brighteon, we try to make your life easier, if possible, through knowledge sharing and preparedness and survival tips, including our sponsors that offer a lot of really strong survival gear that can help you navigate these things. So thank you for your support, and I wish you the best success getting through this. God bless you all. Thank you for watching today. Take care. A global reset is coming, and that's why I've recorded a new 9-hour audiobook It's called the Global Reset Survival Guide. You can download it for free by subscribing to the naturalnews.com email newsletter, which is also free. I'll describe how the monetary system fails. I also cover emergency medicine and first aid and what to buy to help you avoid infections. So download this guide. It's free. It's my gift to you simply because I want like-minded people to survive.